What's up, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of RobLive. This is episode 10, and today we're talking about perfection. As always, we're going to start with some quotes, and our first quote comes from Kim Collins that says, "Strive for continuous improvement instead of perfection." Our second quote comes from George Will, which is, "The pursuit of perfection often impedes improvement." So, the reason that we went with perfection this week is actually a very personal one, and that is it's been about 8 or 9 days since I've created a episode, and that's not because I don't have episodes scripted. It doesn't mean that I don't have the equipment ready. I mean, everything's in place for me to create a new episode, and the reason it's taken so many days is why I've been waiting for the quote-unquote perfect topic to come through. And so that sort of like inspired this whole idea, like, wait, what am I waiting for? Let's just do it on perfection, and the fact that sometimes it can get in the way of what we're really trying to accomplish, right? And that is improvement. So as always, we have our quote, and then we have some real life examples. And that first one is actually this, right? The fact that I waited so long to create this episode because I wanted to find the quote unquote perfect topic. And maybe this is it, but I do know that, I wasted some time doing this. I could have, released 3 or 4 episodes in that time, but, I was paralyzed with this idea of waiting for the perfect topic instead of just moving forward with what I had. I said, all right, well, that's a great lesson that I'm currently, struggling through. Let's share it with our viewers. So another great example of this, I witnessed in my classroom on occasion. In this particular case, I had a very talented creative writing student, and this student turned in excellent work. The issue was her work was consistently past the deadline, and she would always ask for an extension and, can we a little bit longer? And, I work with that, and that's fine. But when it became a consistently missed deadline issue, it started to affect her grade. And about mid-semester in our progress report, I'm reflecting on the student's grade and looking at some of my other students. I'm going, okay, I have an average student who turns in decent work, and they currently have an A in this class, where I have a very talented writer who is struggling to meet deadlines and currently has a C+ in this class. The grade, isn't a direct reflection of the quality or the person's abilities. More so, it's just a matter of getting it in on time. And it wasn't like this talented writer was, just not doing the work. The work was completed. I'd say, hey, do you have your poem? She's like, oh, yeah, I'm working on it. I said, well, can I see what you have so far? Because, it was due yesterday. And she'd show me this completed, beautifully written poem. And I'd be like, why didn't you turn this in? Well, it's not quite there, Mr. I. It's got to be perfect. Right? And I said, listen, I have no issue with the pursuit of perfection and wanting to get things right. But when it starts to hurt your grade, you're missing deadlines, or you feel like paralyzed that you can't move forward until that perfection has been attained in this particular area, then it becomes somewhat of a concern. And so I, was just trying to explain to the student, I'd rather you turn in something completed and on time, which I feel would be quality work, as opposed to holding off 2-3 weeks and missing deadlines where I have to give you half credit, if any credit at all, because it's so late in the game that you're turning in these assignments, right? And again, this was just that trap of pursuing perfection. Another real life example comes from one of my favorite hip hop groups of all time. They're called A Tribe Called Quest. And the Tribe Called Quest had a very creative and just a very brilliant producer who was part of the group. One of their rappers, his name was Q-Tip. And he would be in the studio for hours on end, trying to perfect the record, just getting the right sample or the right snare drum or the perfect bass line, right? Whatever it may be, he was always trying to improve on his craft as a songwriter, producer, creator. And again, no issue with that, except in this particular case, and it's in the documentary. There's a documentary created about the band. They're interviewing in the documentary their manager, Chris Lighty, and Chris is talking about how he literally had to break into the studio, take the 20 tracks that they had already completed, created, and said, just give me it. And they're like, no, we need more time. And, I've got to, change this and fix that or make this better. He's like, dude, your fans are waiting for it. The record company is waiting for it. We need to put out an album. Give me what you have. And so he took the 20 tracks that he had, turned it in to the record label, and they released the album. And it was a huge hit, right? These songs were already great. But in Q-Tip's pursuit for perfection, he was delaying the process, right? An extreme example of this is a band called Guns N' Roses. Their lead singer, songwriter, producer, Axl Rose, was stuck in the studio. I want to say like 6-7 years, right, waiting for this album to come out. I can't quite remember the album. I don't know if it was Rain, the Rain album, or something like that. But anyway, this album took like 6-7 years to come out, right? And as a band, you lose momentum. It's not that the fans forget about you, but they're not going to wait 7 years. They start going elsewhere for their music. And so in this case, this pursuit of perfection impeded their progress as a band, some would argue. Right? So with that being said, the RobLive challenge this week is, number 1, identify an area in your life where you're currently pushing yourself to be perfect. Step 2, restructure your approach to now monitoring your progress in this area on a weekly basis. And when you identify a small improvement in your progress in this area, take the time to celebrate that improvement. One of the struggles with perfection is it's this constant feeling that you're never good enough, or you're constantly failing, when in fact you're overlooking some of the smaller improvements that may not be perfection, but is better than what it was when you started the process. Right? Again, we go back to what I do here with RobLive and creating episodes. These episodes should slowly start to improve over time. They're not going to be great all the time. It's not always going to be the perfect topic. I'm not always going to be able to elaborate or illustrate with such clarity that everybody is inspired by these episodes. It's going to take time. But if I, like I did now, sit 8-9 days before I release my next episode because I'm being hard on myself, because I'm looking for the perfect topic, it may never come. What we need, folks, is reps, repetition, opportunities for practice. And sometimes we don't get those opportunities because we're stuck pursuing perfection, and we're kind of paralyzed in that process. So please take on the RobLive challenge, and consider this week slowing it down and focusing on minor improvements rather than this big absolute idea of perfection. And see, as always, it's love, peace, and chicken grease. I'm RobLive, and we're out.